friends, it's Dan. Welcome back. Welcome to another plastic miniature review, this time for the newly released Wargames Atlantic Operators, which is produced for their kind of quickly growing pulp adventure line. And as with all of my sponsored videos, I want you to know Wargames Atlantic sent this to me, actually alongside 2 other boxes, which we'll be reviewing here in the coming week or so. So massive thanks to them for their support on this one. I know this box has been highly anticipated by the community, at least I've been anticipating it highly ever since I found that it was coming down the pipeline. And no surprise too, because I'm frankly shocked that no one up to this point has made kind of a generic modern paramilitary type set in multi-part plastic. We see tons of options out there in metal from various companies, but this is actually, to my knowledge, the first set, really one of the only modern sets in multi-part plastic. We have lots of earlier historical sets, certainly lots of fantasy and sci-fi that we've looked at. I think to the back of the box could articulate better than I could without just paraphrasing it, all the different things you could use this for. And that really comes to comes down to the head and the weapon options in this is not really meant to represent a like organized military unit, or I should say a standardized military unit. It could to a certain extent, but this is more to represent things like special forces, a crime syndicate. You can see on the back here, there's like some bucket hats, there's a couple of helmet types, there's some balaclavas if you wanted to represent those criminals. So there's a lot you can do with a box like this, not to mention going back to, I think it would work fine for like early 90s, like post-Cold War conflicts, all the way up to post-apocalypse or near future kinds of conflicts. So there's a lot you can do with something like this. The box art, as usual, is kind of classic Wargames Atlantic at this point, where you've got a little illustration on the left, some depictions of the miniatures here in the center. I've said before, my favorite box layout that they've been doing is for their medieval range, where they've actually photoshopped out sort of larger versions of these miniatures. But this works fine because the background is not, it's nice and bright. It's not obscuring anything. And on the back, as I mentioned, a couple more examples and then a summary of what's going to come inside the box there. So inside of the box, if you were to pick it up for yourself, you're going to get 4 sprues of 5 miniatures for 20 models total within this set. No bases come in. That's another disclaimer I like to make. There's honestly, like most manufacturers that are making something not for a specific rule set are doing that now. We see that from companies like Victrix as well, where their miniatures don't come with bases because they don't know what game system you want to use these for. So that's just something to be aware of. And of course, the fact that this is 20 miniatures, you have to pay attention with Wargames Atlantic. It really just depends. Sometimes you'll have 24 miniatures in a set. Sometimes it's 30. There's some sets that have 40. Some only have like 12. So this one has 20. It's just something to be aware of at checkout, how many miniatures you're going to get inside of the box. But 20 is certainly fine for most of the game systems that I can think of. So if you're new here, welcome. What we're going to do is isolate one of these sprues, because this is 4 copies of the same sprue. We're going to go through all the bits in detail. I've got a pretty lengthy breakdown of those bits, which we'll look at in just a moment. I'll assemble the models. I'll do some kit bashing for you with some other sets in my collection. I want to do some scale comparisons, as I like to do with different manufacturers, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So let me do that now. Let me isolate one of these sprues here, and then I'll give you a shot of the front and back as a kind of overview before we start drilling down into these details. My normal production notes apply. I sound like a broken record at this point, but that Wargames Atlantic does a really, really good job with production value. There's minimal mold lines that I can see. There's no flash other than like in these random places here, but nothing on miniatures. And you can see mold lines where you would expect down like the side of a figure. There's really no like seam there. So they're nice clean sculpts. Let's start with these bodies here in the center. I'm gonna have to flip the sprue, but that's all right. And I gotta tell you, out of the gates here, remember we're representing modern paramilitary kind of types. So again, that could be special forces, it could be some local militia, it could be a criminal organization. But you can see really heavy Kevlar vests on these guys. Already have some like pouches sculpted onto them. And the detailing, I gotta be honest with you, this is probably some of the best detailed figures that I think we've seen from Wargames Atlantic. And they've been doing some very nice stuff, don't get me wrong, but again, even the little, I don't want to call it riveting because it's not, but all these little indentations on the vests, all the little pouches and belts they've got sculpted on. The folds of the clothing, like on the pant leg there, is really, really impressive. And you can see a good mix of poses too. Some of them are just kind of in like walking poses. You got one in a kneeling, firing pose. That's something to be aware of, that of your 20 miniatures, 4 of them are going to be kneeling. Not a big deal if you're trying to represent them for like an action-oriented game. It's just something to be aware of. And a good mix of armor types too. You can see it's not all just the exact same vest. Again, going back to this concept that this is not meant to represent a like uniformed group. So really impressive start, and nice to see that flat attachment point from Wargames Atlantic here too, because some of their sets, it just depends. Like you've got some companies where you have a standardized head attachment, and in this case, this is my favorite one that they do. And I would say the most common, even though it really just depends. So speaking of heads, let's jump up and down. So let me pan out for a second. There's heads on the left and the right side of the sprue here. Remember, all the bits numbers that I'm going to give you are per sprue. So you have to multiply it by 4 in this case to figure out what's in the box. But there are 27 heads on this sprue of 5 models, which is nuts. That's a 5-to-1 ratio of heads to bodies. Because we saw the bodies are generic but detailed, right? And they're loaded with gear, so they're already have got a lot of personality within them. But the way that you're really going to be able to differentiate the different types, again, militias, special operations forces, crime groups, is with the heads, right? And let me start panning around here because I would like to categorize them for you. And I'll do just one quick pass here on the 2 sides of the sprue, just to show you the detail that we're talking about here, because this also looks great in terms of facial expressions, the detail that is on the hats or the helmets that they're wearing. It just depends. But you've got 5 that are wearing berets. Nice for some like modern commandos. You have 5 in these balaclavas to represent those henchman types. You've got this one Rambo head, so that's fun. It's a neat little inclusion. You got 3 wearing ball caps, so 2 just forward ball caps. You can see a mix of like sunglasses on some of them too. Going back to the actual like operators is what I would call these guys, these heads. You got 3 helmets, and there are 2 more over here, which are more European style helmets, I think, in terms of like modern equipment. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are 3 of these bucket hats. Again, mix of eye gear on them too. And then there are 5 what I'll call advanced helmets, where they've got like a comm system in there. They all have eye protection on and are just a little bit more loaded out than these other helmets. So again, 27 heads, a really strong variety of heads there too, to represent a whole host of different options. You can mix and match if you want. Again, you could have all 20 in these face masks. If you'd like, you can have all 20 with those advanced helmets. That's a great inclusion within this set to have enough heads to equip just about everybody the same way if you wanted to. Now let's talk about my favorite subject matter on these kinds of modern or semi-modern sets, which are all the firearms that are included. I'm going to just kind of rotate around the sprue. I do have some categorization to point out. I just want you to see some of the detail here, because note too that even if you have 2 weapons of the same type, they're not identical. So you've got a couple of like M4 carbines that have different equipment, like different sights, different magazine types, different barrels, different rail systems on them. So it makes for a really nice personalized look to all of these miniatures. So I count, correct me if I'm wrong, there are 2 pistols, both of which are generic enough that I think they could represent a whole host of different pistol options, but they look like kind of like Glocks to me. Right, there's 1 Law, so like rocket launcher type there. There's 1 Saw, so light machine gun over here. There are 4 of those M4s down here. Once again, pay attention to barrels. Like some of them have flash hiders, some of them don't. Again, different sights on them. 1 here. And then there was 1 more up here. Right. So there are 3 weapons in kind of the AK family. These 2 here, and this one up here. Right. There's 1 G36, which is right here. There's 1 L8, is that what it's called? Yeah. LA. It's in the SA-80 family of firearms up here. This is actually the only one that's in a bullpup style. So you got that one up there. There's also this one here I need your help on. This is a mystery weapon for me because it almost looks like it's in the G36 family in terms of the lower receiver in the magazine and the stock, but the barrel and the rail system on it look more like a AK style weapon. So I don't know what this is, but it's very cool looking. And it's definitely decked out in terms of modern equipment. 2 different sights on it. A like quick grip there up on the front, a laser sight. So that's pretty neat. And there's also this one down here, which is I think it's a LMG. I think it's a S6, but I'm not sure. That would be, I think, a Chinese-made light machine gun, if I'm remembering right. And there's one Dragunov up here, an SVD. So sniper rifle option there for you. So there you go, tons and tons of firearms. I actually hope at some point they just do a whole separate sprue of different firearm types. That'd be a really cool inclusion as like an upgrade sprue for a set like this. I can think of dozens of other kinds of firearms you might want to add, even more like European style. That is actually a good place to note here that there's a separate companion set coming out for this box that's called Agents, I think, where again, talking about the kind of open-ended nature of this design, you can make a whole host of different things out of this. That set is kind of the same concept, but the miniatures are wearing suits. So it will represent more like private security, corporate security, or again, it could be like Heat style, movie Heat, that is, villains like robbers. And there's a lot of different weapons in that. I think there were some M4 kind of style weapons, but a lot more MP5s, submachine guns, a couple of different weapon options. So you could, I think, mix and match freely between those sets. So I'll be certainly trying that out once I get that set to review down the road. And then from there, we've got lots of hands that are meant to go with their respective firearms. You can see that Wargames Atlantic uses a numbering system here. So you can see like B1, right, would go with B2, wherever arm B2 is. But you can see all the A, F, so like F2 arm here is going to go with F1, wherever that is. Sometimes you'll have one arm that can work on 2 weapons, but in this case, it looks like it's pretty much 1-to-1. But otherwise, you can see there's a handful of arms that are just like open, right, and then some are pointing, and there's one carrying a knife down here as well. So lots of great options for you. And then despite the fact that these guys already have loads and loads of pouches already sculpted on them, there are actually 3 more here, and down here to carry some more magazines if you like. There's one, I think, thigh holster for a pistol. You could strap that onto a vest if you wanted to. And there's one detonator down here. So loads and loads of options within this sprue, and I'm eager to see how they all go together. So let me cut now. I'm going to do that. I'm going to assemble some of these figures, do some kit bashing for you, and we'll see how they stack up. All right, I got a bunch of stuff built up for you guys so you can kind of see it peeking off from the right there. So the first 3 miniatures are going to be straight out of the set, and I found them very easy to go together. There's really just 4 parts per model, so that's easy enough to throw them together. The 2-part arm attachment system is also very cleverly done in that the left hand is not sculpted onto the firearm itself, which means that you can either use the left arm that's designed to go with it, like if this was K1, there's a K2 arm to go with it, or you could have it more of an at-rest pose like this one and then use a different arm for their left arm, which I think is a clever system. Another one just straight out of the box. You can see very minimal cleanup required too. I don't, clean them up at all except the attachment points, cut those off. But there, I didn't do any filing work or anything, so you can see these are just very clean sculpts. I would say too, we'll see here scale in just a moment, that I think these are going to scale up very nicely with most of your current Wargames Atlantic figures. The weapons, compared to some of the sci-fi stuff I'm about to bring in, are a little bit more true scale, but that's generally true of Wargames Atlantic anyway. But I think these look so detailed. It's a really wonderful little toolkit of a set to make whatever you want. Now, a couple of conversions using the bodies from the operator's set. So this is using, it's North Star bits. So the arms are Scavengers 2. Actually, the head's also Scavenger 2, I think. And then the backpack may, actually that's an easy one. So it's all Scavenger 2 bits with a body from the operator's set. So you can see the arms, the gun itself is a little bit more heroically scaled, but I think it actually works just fine, especially once you paint it up, throw it on a battlefield. Here's one too with, I think it's from the Troopers set. The head might be a mercenary from Stargrave. The backpack is, of course, a Games Workshop bit. You can make yourself a Kazarkin out of these guys. That's the neat thing about the modern aesthetic to these, that I think if you add like a slightly futuristic looking weapon to them, all of a sudden it's a sci-fi miniature. Or vice versa, like if you take a model like this, which is a North Star Stargrave Trooper, if you take a body like that, which is clearly a sci-fi bit, and then you add in modern looking arms and heads, or like a recognizable enough firearm, that's the more fantastical looking one that I couldn't identify, it grounds it a little bit. Right now all of a sudden this takes this sci-fi miniature into a like near future realm. Here's a scavenger bit using just arms from this set. Once again, you can see the arms are a little bit more true scale, but I think they work just fine, especially once you paint them up. Be nice to pepper in some, again, recognizable firearms, especially for like a scavenger type concept. Make it look like they just found a bunch of old weapons. This is a Stargrave Mercenaries 1 body. The head and I think the left arm actually are both from, no, the head is from the Scavengers 2, the left arm might actually be a mercenary arm, but the right arm, this is a very simple swap. It just dropped in the right arm from the Wargames Atlantic set, and that's just to show you that I'm still using the same left arm from this miniature, and that it lines up very nicely. So I think, as I said, if you were just looking to, I'll use the word ground, some of your fantasy or sci-fi miniatures to make them look more like a post-apocalyptic or near-future kind of setting, then just using some of these weapon arms is a great way to do that. Same thing here. So this is a Frostgrave Cultist 2 or 3 body. I'm going to guess 3. The head is from the Scavengers 2 set, and then both of the weapon arms are from the operators. And then same thing here. So again, I've taken a body that this is a Cultist 2 body. The head and arm are from either the Scavengers 1 or 2 frame. And then I just threw in this right arm from the operator's set. And then all of a sudden I've taken something that either looks like a fantasy miniature or a sci-fi miniature, and now it looks like a zombie apocalypse kind of miniature. So let's throw them on the Lazy Susan and see how they all scale up. Alright, let's take them for a spin here. So you can see that the plastic miniatures are from this operator's set. The bodies all are. There's a couple of conversions there, as we just saw, in terms of the bits, but we're mostly paying attention to heights, relative heights, and proportions of the bodies. But you can see some of the miniatures that are primed in white have the name of either a range or manufacturer listed on the base in red, and that some miniatures have those splash or puddle bases, and then some don't. These miniatures don't. It's interesting, I would say that the height is about the same as like a normal Wargames Atlantic sculpt. You can see there's a good example of the Wargames Atlantic Le Grenier on the left and the operator on the right. The operators are just a little bit more true scaled, so I think that might be a conscious choice here. Maybe to have them blend in better with some of the like metal sculpts that are on the market from a number of different companies. But I think, as we've been seeing, that they blend pretty well with just about whatever you want, as long as you're okay with some true scale weapons. So what's the final verdict? I think this is Wargames Atlantic's strongest set to date, not even just in terms of how comprehensive the bits that come within it are. I maybe would have liked like 1 or 2 backpacks, but that's a quibble, right? The detail on these is just really phenomenal, and the number of heads and weapon arms that they include make this a real toolkit of a set for you to use for, I mean, we were talking throughout the entire video about all the different things you can use this for, from, you know, early 90s conflicts to near future, anything in between in terms of subject matter for any kind of paramilitary type. But as we also saw, you can use the bits to blend in with other miniatures, to like take a sci-fi miniature and make it a near future miniature. So I can see, or the opposite, right? You could take these bodies and add some sci-fi bits onto them to do the same thing kind of in reverse. So there's really a lot of utility within a set like this. And then even if we're looking at specific game systems, right, obviously there's lots of RPGs out there. I'm even thinking about them as like henchmen or police within some kind of RPG setting, or like a Batman kind of game. I'm thinking about them as ODST troopers for Halo, Flashpoint. Certainly anything like Necromunda, Stargrave, all of those settings that would want some kind of like enforcer type, fighter. I think that's going to be great for that. I would even use these as like alternate Cadians, maybe with a slight weapon swap for 40k. There's just so much you could do with these, just depending on kind of the bits you use and the paint job that you give them, that this is definitely worth checking out. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, now part of a growing line from their pulp range. They've got zombies, they've got civilians 1 and 2. I have the civilians box we're going to be looking at here momentarily. I mentioned the agents. So I think once you start blending all of these sets together and you have even more head options, even more weapon options, there's so much you can do with sets like these. It's not one to be overlooked. Thank you again, Wargames Atlantic, for sending these our way to check out another fantastic set, and I'm excited to check out the rest of the pulp line here as it develops. Appreciate all you for dropping by for this one in the meantime, and until next time, happy gaming.